Yes, Miriam, we can hear you now, please.
Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I am very happy to see, well, my colleagues and then all the national focal points, old and new national focal points to the UNCCD. My name is Miriam Medel. I am the chief of the Global Policy Advocacy and Regional Cooperation Unit at the Secretariat of the Convention. And it is my pleasure to welcome all of you to this very first orientation webinar that we, together with the regional liaison officers, decided to put together for all of you who are newcomers to our process, but also for those of you who are interested to go more in depth into what we do, what are our current activities, and how are we planning to move forward with the land restoration and drought resilience agenda worldwide. So we will have a very rich program. I am also very grateful to the different colleagues at the Secretariat for giving us their time to provide explanations and information, as I said, on our activities. And I very much hope that this will be useful for all of you, and we can make it as interactive as possible. So thank you very much. Welcome everybody once again. Bienvenidos. Bienvenue. And I will now give the floor to my colleague, I believe it's my colleague Cheikh Touré, who is going to start moderating this session. Thank you.
You hear me? Hello?
Yes, Chef, we can hear you.
Yeah, thank you. Miriam, thank you very much for your opening remarks. I just give the floor to Milka, who will introduce the new focal points. I think they are 15 right now. Milka, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Sheikh, and good morning, good afternoon, colleagues. Thank you for joining. I can see the number is growing, and it's good to see all of you. So briefly, we want to appreciate or introduce the new NFPs that have joined us over the last year and part of this year. We have quite a few of them. So what we'll request you is that whenever I mention your country, if you are already in the meeting, please raise your hand and we'll give you half a minute or 10 seconds just to say your name and your country. And then I'm sure just people to see you and we'll get to know each other with time. So let me check if Eritrea is in. Eritrea, let me know if you're here. Mr. Semere or Mr. Hadgu. A count of one. I think they're still joining. Eswatini, Mr. Bongani, are you in? You can raise your hand and my colleague will give you the floor.
Yeah, they have the floor now, so they can.
Great.
Speak.
That's Eswatini or Eritrea?
It's Eritrea.
Oh, great. Please, you have the floor.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation to this important session. My name is Samara Amlosom. I am the Director General of Agricultural Extension and the focal point for the UNCCD.
Great. Thank you so much.
My colleague Michael is outside now. Maybe he will join us very soon.
Great, that's all right. Eswatini, Mr. Bongani.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Bongani Makongo from Eswatini. I'm the national focal point for the UNCCD. I'm not new in UNCCD. I've been the focal point for the CST for the country. I thank you.
Great, thank you. We go to Gabon. Mr. Roger Francois. Are you there? I assume they are here to join. We go to Kenya, Engineer Festus. Kenya, Engineer Festus. Okay, we move on to Lesotho. Mr. Nkwebe, are you here? Please raise your hand and you'll be given the floor. Okay, we move to Malawi, Mr. Kasizo. If you're already here, please raise your hand. I believe they're still coming. We move to Mauritania.
Mr. Kazizo is there, so
Okay, Mr. Kasizo, you have the floor.
Thanks very much. My name is Kasizo Chirambo. I'm the Deputy Director of Forestry responsible for planning. I've just been appointed the new national focal point for Malawi. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, sir. We move to Mauritania, Mr. Mohammed. Please raise your hand if you're already here. Mauritania. Okay, we move to Mauritius.
Mr. Mohammed is there.
Okay, great.
Mr. Mohammed, you have the floor.
Okay, I think he must be experiencing some challenges. We are not able to hear you, but let us know if you can hear us one more time, Mauritania.
Je vous entends bien.
Please go ahead.
Oui, donc moi je suis Mohamed Abdallah Yousselme, je suis le point focal de la convention au niveau national. Voilà, qu'est-ce que vous voulez qu'on développe sur le profil? Je suis ingénieur forestier, je suis le directeur de la protection et de la restauration des espèces et des milieux du ministère de l'Environnement et du Développement durable de la Mauritanie. Voilà, c'est bon?
C'est bon, merci. We'll move to Mauritius. Mr. Kurun, are you here? Please raise your hand. Mauritius.
Oui, je suis là encore.
Mr. Mohammed, thank you so much. Please, you can mute your microphone. We move to Mauritius. Okay, we move now to Mozambique. Mozambique, Mr. Manuel Victor. If you're here, please raise your hand.
Bonjour à tout le monde. Je m'appelle Emmanuel Victor Poyo. Je travaille du Mozambique. Je suis le nouveau point focal national. Je travaille au ministère de la Terre et de l'Environnement. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. We move to Somalia. His Excellency Khadija. Let me know if you're here. You can raise your hand and we'll give you the floor. Somalia. Somalia. Okay, we move to Sudan. Dr. Mona. Please raise your hand if you're here. Sudan. Okay, we move to Azerbaijan. Mr. Toglu, please, if you're here, raise up your hand and we'll give you the floor. All right, we move to Serbia. Miss Marija, are you in house? You can raise your hand.
Hello, everyone.
Okay, was that Serbia? Okay, we move on to Ukraine. Ukraine, we have Mr. Edward. Please raise up your hand, we'll give you the floor. Ukraine.
Probably
Right.
Alla Ilenko is there, so.
Okay. You can introduce the team, Allah.
Hello, I am Bilal from Jordan.
Great. Thank you for introducing yourself. That's Jordan. We go to Hungary.
Hello.
We can have either Ms. Nicoletta or Mr. Marcel.
I'm Professor Rafat Misak, Egypt, from Desert Research Center. My pleasure to join this meeting.
Thank you, Egypt. Let me go back to Hungary. Do you have anyone from Hungary? Kindly raise your hand. Okay, I believe they're still joining. Let's go to Italy. Anyone from Italy? Mr. Mawar. Italy, we go to Malta. Mr. Joseph. If you're here, please raise your hand. Italy, Malta. All right, we now finish up with Croatia. Croatia, Mr. Tiana. Croatia. Great. Thank you so much. I think those are the newest new NFPs that we have for today. I'm sure many will be joining. And welcome on board. I'm sure this session will be more interactive. And I would just go to the next slide.
Do you hear me?
How are you? How are you? How are you?
Yes, I can hear you. Who is that? Which country are you from?
Do you hear me, Serdar Yegül? Do you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Which country are you from?
Turkey, from Turkey. I am Serdar Yegül. I am working as a national focal point of Turkey. And hi, everybody, for a good meeting.
Thank you so much.
Hello, Malcolm. Hello, this is
Hello, 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 hello.
Hello, here.
Yes, Baitsepi.
Hello.
Hello. I'm
From
also new
Madagascar.
I'm also
Hello.
new to the.
Okay, thank you so much. I noticed there's echo because of many people trying to speak at the same time, but allow us not to go into introducing everyone, but we really want to appreciate everyone who has come on, and we have to move on to the next session. Please allow us.
How are you?
I would kindly request that we all mute our microphone just for now. Thank you. I will have an opportunity to know all of you. Allow me to move to the next slide just to acquaint ourselves with the housekeeping rules. Just be mindful that this meeting has interpretation in all the UN6 languages. You only need to go to the interpretation icon and you choose your preferred language. We'll also just to note that all the participants are on listen-only mode, and we encourage everyone to use the Q&A box where you'll be able to post your question and your intervention. I'll also kindly request all of you to go where your profile is and just click on rename and type your country and then your name follows. That way we are able to identify which country you're from. You can check how my name appears. It appears as UNCCD and then my name. So I'll encourage all the participants to put your name and then to put your country first and then your name. And then lastly, may you, when we give you the floor, kindly turn on your camera and we'll be happy to see you. Thank you so much. I hand over the floor to Nadia to take over the next session. Welcome all.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Dear national focal points of the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, this universal international agreement aimed at promoting a global response to desertification and land degradation. Let me briefly introduce myself. My name is Nadezhda Dementieva, or Nadia, as we are a family here, the UNCCD family. So I'm the Regional Liaison Officer for the Central and Eastern Europe. As you know, it's Annex 5 of the Convention. And just to introduce a little bit the themes of our first session, I also would like to remind you that our convention has 5 annexes, which are corresponding to regions, different regions: Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the Caribbean, Northern Mediterranean, and Central and Eastern Europe. So this is our first session. I will be moderating it, and we are having a wonderful wonderful panelists who will be speaking to you. First, it will be Miriam Medel Garcia. She already presented herself. Then it will be Professor Richard Byron Cox. Then we will have our program and policy officers, and then we will pass the floor to Anya Thust, the Secretary of the CRIC. So now I would like to give the floor to Ms. Miriam Medel Garcia. She is our Chief of Global Policy Advocacy and Regional Cooperation Unit of UNCCD. Miriam, you have the floor, and she will present us the UNCCD COP15 outcomes, as you know, which took place COP15 last year in Abidjan. Many of you have been there, and also the progress towards COP16, which we will have next year. So looking forward for it. Miriam, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nadia. And before I start with my presentation, I would like to make a couple of, I would like to provide you with a brief information. So I must apologize, as I am currently on mission in the wonderful Cape Verde, in attending a meeting, an FAO meeting on water scarcity in agriculture and representing the UNCCD. So I have very, very flimsy internet connection, and then I will also have to leave this session to go and attend some other meetings. I will be leaving you in the very good hands of all my colleagues, and specifically of the regional liaison officers, whom you know very well. As I said at the beginning, this is the first meeting of the type that we do in this new time, in this after the restructuring of the Secretariat, and we very much would like to have these meetings periodically, these touch base periodically for the new national focal points, but also for the ones that have been with us for a longer time. It is a good opportunity to touch base, to everybody get back on the same page, to raise issues that you may have in your mind, and to provide you information on what is the Secretariat doing to pursue the objectives of the convention. So that's why we did a change in the program, and I apologize for that, but I'm sure it will not mean much in terms of how the program will flow. Second, I would like to well, just to share with you, a few of us had been in Istanbul last week to mark the final activity of the Ankara initiative with a workshop aimed at African countries, and some countries from Central and Eastern Europe were able to join us on negotiations training and on incorporating drought and land restoration into national policy planning. We are very grateful to the government of Turkey for providing the UNCCD with such valuable support to pursue the objectives of the convention. Just for you to know, for eligible parties, we are aiming to have this negotiations training offered to all of you along the calendar year. So please, you will be hearing from us. We are also trying to secure funding for all of that. Just bear with us. I just wanted to share a reflection. I mean, we had been there, we enjoyed the wonderful hospitality of Turkey. And then as soon as we came back, we heard about the devastating news of the earthquake that unfortunately in Turkey and in Syria. So for that reason, before we start, I would like to ask all of us to have just a minute of silence in memory and in condolence of our brothers and sisters that in the affected regions in Turkey and Syria. So if we may, thank you. Thank you very much. Our prayers and thoughts are with them. With that, I would like to move on to a very brief presentation on COP15. The road towards COP16 will actually be more, shared by the colleagues. I will go dive deeper into the topics. So I just want to situate all of us on where we are and what were the outcomes of the COP in Abidjan. I think Mahir is going to share my Laura is sharing my presentation. Yes. So as you know, we had, we can go to the next slide. And I think, yes, thank you. Next slide. So the COP was convened in Abidjan in Cote d'Ivoire. Many of you were there. Many of you will be with us in Saudi at the end of 2024, where we will have our COP16. We had 3 meetings in one, so the Conference of the Parties, the Committee on Science and Technology, and the CRIC 20, which is the Committee for the Review of the Implementation of the Convention. And the CRIC is our next intergovernmental meeting to take place in CRIC 21 to take place in Uzbekistan in October this year, where we will all meet together again. Next slide. We had a record participation for this convention. We had nearly 7,000 participants, which is quite remarkable considering that we were still in the very aftermath of COVID or in the midst of COVID-19. And we had 11 heads of state and government, 52 ministers, delegates from 133 parties, 33 intergovernmental organizations, and 116 civil society organizations. We had representatives from a wide array of stakeholders, from the private sector, women, youth, and of course, we were very closely followed by the media. And I think this is remarkable because when you compare our process to the climate process or the biodiversity process, sometimes the land process doesn't get as much attention. And we are really trying to change that, and with your support, because this is really a very, well, it has universal participation, universal membership like the other two, but it's also a very, very crucial and essential convention for the promotion of sustainable development worldwide. So we were happy and grateful to count with all these participants from around the world, and we are very grateful for the generosity and the hospitality of the government of Cote d'Ivoire in having a very successful conference. Next slide. We had 38 decisions that, in a nutshell, were adopted to establish policy frameworks to improve drought resilience, reduce land degradation worldwide, and create the enabling environment to scale up land restoration efforts, including through increased investments in human and social capital, as well as improve data collection, monitoring, and reporting. So we now have the basis, the foundation for strong and decisive and impactful action for land restoration and drought resilience worldwide. Next slide. For drought, my colleague Daniel, who is also here in Cape Verde with me, will come in later and will explain where we are on drought. But just in a nutshell, the Paris tasked a new intergovernmental working group with identifying and evaluating all options, including global policy instruments and regional policy frameworks, to shift from a reactive to proactive drought management. Drought should not be dealt with as an emergency, as a one-off natural hazard, but it could be, while not entirely prevented, the vulnerability of societies could be and can be reduced, and that is what we are aiming for. And these new policy options that the Intergovernmental Working Group is working on will help countries to develop national plans, establish early warning systems, and mobilize drought finance. And as I said, Daniel will explain in length what is the Intergovernmental Working Group doing. They have met already once. They will meet in March again. So I will not stop here. Next slide. Another major outcome of the conference were the decisions related to gender equality and women's empowerment, where parties reaffirmed their commitment to improve gender equality in processes and practices. They stressed that they are committed to continue efforts to improve women's involvement in land management through secure land tenure. And we have an Abidjan Declaration on achieving gender equality for successful land restoration, which emerged from a very successful gender caucus. Again, my colleague Sasha is going to deep dive into gender equality, but I just wanted to stress that this is one of the major outcomes of the COP, and definitely something where the Secretariat is putting a lot of efforts and a lot of attention in. Next slide. Land tenure, as you know, we are very proud and very grateful that the parties to our process are bold and brave to take the land tenure issue further, to have a conversation around the very difficult issue of land tenure, and they deliver a strong mandate to enhance tenure security and tenure rights to natural resources, but particularly for people in vulnerable situations, namely indigenous peoples, women, and other vulnerable groups. The priority is to promote more secure land tenure in line with the voluntary guidelines on land tenure coming from the Committee of Food Security of FAO, in the implementation of activities to combat desertification, land degradation, and drought, and achieve land degradation neutrality, building on the technical guide that we have produced upon the mandate of our parties, together with our partners from FAO. This includes raising awareness on the importance of responsible land governance to combat desertification, land degradation, and drought. Please pay attention towards the end of the session. My colleague Sasha is going to come in and explain the very next steps related to the consultations you mandated us to do on land tenure, which are starting actually next week. And for the success of those consultations, we do need your full engagement. Next slide. Sun and dust storms, which is an issue that is increasing in importance, and people around the world are more and more preoccupied with it. They are exacerbated very clearly by climate change. So in our context, parties agreed to develop a voluntary policy guideline. You will be hearing about that very soon from us. Compile an inventory of existing sun and dust storms related tools and technologies beyond the sun and dust storm toolbox that will be launched also to later this year, and to facilitate the organization of a science policy dialogue on sun and dust storms, which are all work streams where we are working on in the Secretariat. Next slide. Youth engagement. It is very exciting that our parties are interested in promoting youth engagement and employment in agriculture and food systems. We do need the youth, and we do need their input to be able to successfully promote land restoration for sustainable development and for the achievement of many of the SDGs. So parties urge the private sector working on the food, feed, fiber sector to make positive contributions to addressing desertification, land degradation, and drought, and continue promoting decent land-based jobs for youth and land-based youth entrepreneurship. You will also be hearing from us and the global mechanism on what we are doing to try to promote this engagement from the private sector. And the Secretariat is very much right now involved and working on developing a youth engagement strategy for the consideration of the parties at the next COP. Next slide. Synergies with CVD and UNFCCC. This is very important for all of parties. And for us, we were very happy that parties endorse the use of nature-based solutions to enhance the synergies among the Rio Conventions and to further advance the intertwined land, biodiversity, and climate agendas. As you know, the three are very much connected, and a land restoration activity is a climate adaptation and mitigation action because it brings carbon back to the soil, but it's also a biodiversity conservation action. So we are very much listening to your guidance in how to develop and enhance the synergies and the synergistic implementation of the three Rio Conventions. More so now after the 30 by 30 by 30 that was adopted at the Biodiversity COP in Montreal last December. I think that's it. Next slide. Yes, that's it on my end. As I said, on the road to COP16, all I have to say is that we are very grateful for the parties. We have this breadth of decisions, and we are really trying to work across the Secretariat to help you in their implementation and in the advancement and the enhancement of the regime. Before I finish, just one final reflection that we did together with our colleagues at Istanbul last week. We often think of our convention as a convention about land, and it certainly is. But more than that, we have to keep in mind that our convention is a convention about people, their livelihood, their security, their access to sustainable development. So with that in mind, I will give the floor back to Nadia. We'll stay around a little bit longer, but then you are gonna have to indulge me, as I said, I will have to leave. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Miriam. Dear colleagues, we have new attendees who are joining our meeting, and we have in our Q&A section, we already have many messages. We would like to thank you for that. Rodrigo Andrade from Chile wrote us, as well as Manuel Victor Poyo from Mozambique, Musa Diarra from Mali, Kadiata Madi Diallo, she also wrote us from Republique de Guinée, Saliha Fordas from Algeria, Murat Temejano from Kazakhstan, Maxwell Mature also wrote us, the manager of environmental planning from Zimbabwe, Alvin Dornally, and we have others joining. Thank you so much. And now I would like to give the floor to our professor, Richard Byron Cox. He's head of the Office of Capacity Development and Innovation at the Science and Technology and Innovation Unit of the UNCCD Secretariat. Professor, you have the floor to tell us about UNCCD, its history, and the party's roles and responsibilities, the responsibilities of the NFPs that are present here. Thank you so much.
Okay, good afternoon to all of you. Could anybody just raise their hand? Miss Nadia, could you raise your hand to show me that you're hearing me, please? Just raise your hand. Good, thank you. Okay, good afternoon to all of you. And I have 20 minutes beginning now, so I have very limited time and I will try to use that as best as I can. I do promise you that I wouldn't go beyond that. But before I get there, let me welcome all of the new focal points. This tells me that there's a changing of the guards at the UNCCD. And so probably my time has come to leave as well. However, it is a great honor and a great pleasure to speak to you all today. And I did not make a presentation because I did not write one, because I find it better just to have a discourse, a conversation. And later, if you do have questions, then of course, I'm sure our moderator would allow that to take place at the end of the session. So let's get to it. So I'm supposed to answer two basic questions. The first is the history of the UNCCD, and secondly, what do you do as national focal points? Well, let's get to the first one. Basically, the UNCCD, if you look at the name of the convention, it tells you that it is supposed to combat desertification and deal with drought specifically in Africa. Note that part, specifically in Africa. And that specifically in Africa, well, not specifically, but given priority to Africa. And that tells you the history of the convention itself. You see, in the 1970s, the Sahel had suffered greatly from drought, and the land, a significant part of the land had died, you know. And so the United Nations went to Nairobi at a conference, and they then, that's in 1977, and they agreed to what is called the United Nations Conference on desertification, and they agreed to a plan of action for desertification. Okay, that was in 1997. By the time 1992 came around, when we did have what was called UNCCD, which is the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development, the whole world had realized that this plan of action to deal with desertification wasn't working. You see, in the Sahel, thousands of people had died, animals had died, production had fallen significantly, and we needed to understand that the problem was a global problem. You know, but many parties were resistant to this. Oh, it's an African problem. It's a third world problem. It's a problem of the South. It's not a problem for the rest of the world. But interestingly, everybody agreed at UNCCD in 1992 in Rio that, okay, we should have a global convention. And so it was decided then and there that this convention came into being. Now note this is a very important thing to note, that UNCCD is the only true Rio convention. In other words, it was born in Rio. It was conceived in Rio. The other two, there are three Rio Conventions, climate change, biodiversity, and UNCCD. The other two had already been written, had already been in principle agreed to. People just went down there to sign them. This one is where they agreed. So basically, a machinery, and the governmental machinery was set up in 1992, and by 1994, they had finished their work, and the general agreement came about. And by 1996, the convention came into force on the 17th of June. It was opened in Paris in 1994 for signing, and by 1996, it came into force after the 50th ratification. And that is why June 17th is World Desertification Day. That's the basic history. No, from then on, therefore, we had what we call a conferences of the parties, okay? And this is where everybody met together and decided, how should this process go forward? How do we implement this convention? What do we do to make sure that this thing is a success, right? Now, this therefore meant that the agreement that was agreed, that they came up with in 1994, and which came into force in 1996, was just a blanket agreement. What do I mean by a blanket agreement? Well, in the law, you have what is called a blanket norm. It doesn't give any specifics, right? And that convention just simply said, we will fight desertification. It didn't give a timeline as to when we will succeed. It didn't say anything about concretely what are the targets, what are the objectives, what do we want to achieve over a particular period of time. If you look at the convention, it is basically a convention of very generic terminology in terms of law, you know. And so 10 years passed by and everybody realized, hey, nothing is happening, you know, we're not getting anywhere, okay? And so by 2008 in Spain, we realized, no. You have to have a specific set of goals, a specific set of things you want to achieve, and you have to have them time bound. In other words, you have to have a time frame in which all of this should be set. And so our first strategy came about. It is called the 10-year strategic plan for the implementation of the UNCCD, and it ran from 2008 to 2018. Okay, and it had what was called operational objectives, right? And these were objectives that we realized in implementing the convention, you know, and there was strategic objective, which was objectives that we had to achieve over a particular period of time with concrete results. So that was the 10-year strategy. Okay, now, you know, in 2015, the world agreed to something called the Sustainable Development Goals, okay? And these are 17, you know that, okay? Now, to bring this convention in line with that, okay, we had a new strategy, and that strategy now runs from 2018 to 2030. What's important here to understand is that over that period of time we're talking about, from 1996 to now, there has been a consistent evolution as regards the UNCCD process. You know, at first we just had a convention with blanket norms, then we had a 10-year strategy, then we now have a 2018-2030 strategy. But in all of that, we move from just dealing with the issue of land degradation, generally speaking or broadly speaking, and in particular as regards Africa, and in particular as regards what is called arid and semi-arid lands, to something called land degradation neutrality, which is a global thing. You understand? So the whole world now has given us the responsibility not just to deal with land degradation, you know, neutrality, not just to do with land degradation generally, sorry, but land degradation neutrality across the globe, regardless of where that takes place. So what I'm saying in a nutshell is that we can see the movement of this convention from what was seen as just a regional thing, in other words, and in particular giving priority to Africa, to understanding that this is a global matter and the whole world need to be involved. Incidentally, I can tell you that the UNCCD is probably the most ratified international convention in the world. It's the only one that I know that has 197 parties, including the African Union and European Union. The UN itself, the general body of the UN, only has 193 parties. So our convention has 4 more than that. It's important to understand how significant this is. Now, you're here because you're new focal points and you want to understand a little bit of what you are called upon to do as a focal point. What is your job, right? What is expected of you? Well, in general terms, we can break this down into 4 basic areas. Okay, the first of this is at the global level. Okay, and I will deal with each in a little bit of detail later. So we have the global level. Then you have what is called the regional level, right? Then the sub-regional level, and then the national level, right? The most important of these is actually the national level. But why did I put it last? Then you would figure out in a while. Okay, so let's deal with these things from the 4 levels I mentioned. The global level. Well, at the global level, this is where you all come together. Each country has a seat at the table, okay? And you heard my colleague, Mrs. Miriam, explaining what happened at COP15, okay? That is what we mean. The COP just means the conference of the parties. Everybody comes there and everybody have the right to discuss and participate in this process. And whatever comes out of that, sorry, I was just reading a note which was sent by the chat by Miss Nadia. That's why you hear me arming like that. Okay, so whatever comes out of that is agreed to by all the parties. At the international level, there are 4 basic organs which we see operating there. The first is the COP itself, which is the overall body. It's the powerful, it is the God of the convention. In other words, it is the place that can do anything. It can change the convention itself. It adopts all decisions. It determines the budget that we run for 2 years. Okay, it determines what are the key issues that we are going to focus on over the next 2 years, over the next 3 years, over the next 10 years. In other words, this is God. This is God, G-O-D, God, the ultimate authority. Okay. And every party, we don't usually vote at the COP. We come to things by consensus. People agree, okay? In other words, and even if you don't agree, if you don't oppose, then you remain silent, okay? We come to it by consensus. That's at the international level. Let's come to the regional level. Well, the regional level, if you look, you would have heard, I think my colleague, Miss Nadia mentioned the annexes of our convention. And that tells you, right? There are 5 of them. The first one is for Africa. The second is for Asia. 3rd, Latin America and the Caribbean. 4th, Northern Mediterranean. And 5, Central and Eastern Europe. And so as you can see, the convention operates at this regional level. And what happens is that all of these parties from these regions come together before the COP, usually, and they discuss what is important to them as a region and what they would like to take to the COP as a region. When it's a question of money, in other words, they would say, oh, we want the budget to be increased by so-and-so. When it's a question of science, okay? Or when it's a question of technology, okay? But they come together as a region. So there's Africa, Annex 1, and there is Central and Eastern Europe, Annex 5. Then we come to sub-region. Well, the sub-region just means within the region, there are different sub-regions. So let's take Africa. You have North Africa, you have West Africa, you have East Africa, you have Southern Africa, okay? So these sub-regions are closer one with the other, and they have a sub-regional position on these matters. So for example, you have SADC, which is in Southern Africa, okay? You have IGRAD, which is in Eastern Africa. Let's take Latin America and the Caribbean, for example. In Latin America and the Caribbean, it's one big region, but we have the Caribbean, okay? We have Mesoamerica, right? We have Andean America, and we have Cono del Sur, right? Which is the corner of the South. So in Latin America, we have these sub-regions. And again, people meet at the sub-regional level to discuss and agree as to what is important for the sub-region, and they bring it up to the regional level. From the regional level, it goes to the COP, the global level. And finally, I want to talk about the national level. And this is where it matters. In Latin, we would say that there is no land in the world which is res communis. In other words, there's no land which belongs to everybody in common. Land always belongs to a particular country. Okay, so there's the land of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, where I'm from. There's the land of Niger, there's the land of Mali, and so on and so forth. Okay, these are specific boundaries. And so this convention is implemented on land. And this is why at the national level is most important. So what do you do at the national level? Well, firstly, it is your job as a national focal point to respond to the process at our levels. So for example, letters or information that comes from the Secretariat or from the COP comes to you as a national focal point. It is your job to respond to that. It is your job to answer on behalf of your country. That's one. Two, you are responsible for overseeing the implementation of this convention at the national level. I'm looking at the time. So I know I have time. And therefore, in this case, you have to work significantly, coordinate significantly the national actions. Usually, you do this through a national action program, which you design and develop, right? In this case right now, most countries are aiming at what is called land degradation neutrality. And so they have a plan to achieve that. That is part and parcel of the National Action Plan. So your key here is implementation, okay? At least coordinating that implementation. Now, if you're coordinating implementation, of course, what does it mean? It means first and foremost, you have to work with all the entities that are involved in that process of national implementation. So you have the Ministry of Finance, because implementation has got to be paid for, okay? You have the Ministry of Planning because it has to be planned, okay? You have the Ministry of Agriculture because they use water. They use land and water. You have the Ministry of Forestry, and so on and so forth, right? And you might have a Ministry of Sustainable Development, as is the case of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, where I hail from, okay? But you have to work as the focal point in coordinating of that. But it's not just government agencies, mind you, lest you misunderstand. It's not just government agencies. You have, for example, NGOs who work on the ground. You have community-based organizations, right? And you have other civil society organizations, all of whom in one way or the other contribute to this process. So you as the national focal point must do some work there as well. One of your key tasks as national focal point is awareness raising, right? Because you cannot implement something, you cannot have people working with you, and you cannot convince them to work with you if they are not aware, okay? You can't do this. So what you have to understand, basically speaking, is that as at the national level, as a national focal point, of your country, your duties are based on 4 planks. 1, international, 2, regional, 3, sub-regional, and 4, national. But that last one is where you really and truly matter, because it is you who then it is you as a national focal point who then takes your country's position to the sub-regional level, then takes your country's position to the regional level, and then takes your country's position to the global level. So the point is, the national focal point is key in all of this. One last thing, you must understand that the national focal point operates in terms of what he does at 3 other levels, which is important. Firstly, the broad political level, because this is a political process. Whether you want that or not, that is a fact, okay? So he operates politically. Secondly, he operates technically, okay? Because this is technical work. And thirdly, he operates scientifically. And he does this through what are called the STCs. Each country has a scientific and technological correspondent. So those are basically the ideas I wanted to share with you within the limited time that we have. Thank you very, very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Richard, and thank you very much to use exactly your 20 minutes left, which is a very short time. And thank you for the historical insight into the convention. We have in our Q&A section, I would like to remind you that we have a Q&A section. Please write your questions. And if it's directed to some of the panelists, please write to whom you are addressing your questions, and I will raise it in the end of our session. And meanwhile, we have Garang Arok from South Sudan saying hi, Kabango Freddy from Uganda, Mamadou Kora from Senegal, and we have Jorge Luis Garcia from Mexico. And we have one of the questions is if we're going to share these documents. And I would like to say that yes, a recording and report will be shared afterwards. Maybe not in exactly after this meeting, but we will share it with you. Thank you so much. And I would like to give the floor now to Mr. Daniel Tsegai, Professor Daniel Tsegai, Program Officer on Drought at the Global Policy Advocacy and Regional Cooperation Unit. Daniel will tell us about the Intergovernmental Working Group on Drought and on drought in general. Daniel, you have 7 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nadia, for the... Excuse me, there is some loud noise. Sorry, so, okay, my name is Daniel. Thank you very much, Nadia, for the kind introduction, and I'm very much pleased to be with you here today to give you some kind of introduction into the work of the Secretariat on Drought in general, but also the highlights on the IWG. But it doesn't allow me to share screen. Can you allow me to share my screen, please?
Daniel, you are allowed, so you can share.
Okay, great. Okay, I think the discussion today will be mainly on the IWG, the Intergovernmental Working Group on Drought, but the UNCCD Secretariat has been working with countries in terms of supporting development of national drought policy based on principle of risk reduction. About 70 countries participated in this initiative. More than half of them are actually from Africa. 35 countries participated in this initiative. And you can find it, all the documents, all the national drought plans that has been published also on our UNCCD website. And we have also supported 2 regional initiatives. One was for the SADC, that is the Southern Africa Development Community. 60 member countries were also came together to discuss how to mitigate impacts of drought. They tried to share knowledge and also experience, and they came up with a 10-year strategy on drought preparedness. And this is at least in terms of the Africa, and for me, I think I would like to highlight today a bit on the IWG, which is a kind of a hot issue, maybe also of interest to those who are new to the as new focal points for the UNCCD Secretariat. So the COP, the Conference of Parties in Abidjan in May 2022, discussed the first IWG, an intergovernmental working group that was established in India back in 2019. And this IWG came up with a report. They discussed the report, and the idea was to re-establish a new intergovernmental working group on drought, on how to sustainably manage drought under the UNCCD. So this IWG, I'm going to tell you about the composition, but their terms of references are first, how can we identify and evaluate all options? What are the options, first of all? And how can we evaluate all these options in terms of global, regional, and national levels, policy instruments? And what are the appropriate mechanisms to manage drought under the convention, so that we are able to shift our management approach from reactive to proactive? What does it mean? Instead of waiting for drought to strike, countries need to be more prepared and become more proactive, and working on drought preparedness in non-drought times. And the IWG was also tasked to prepare justification for the elements or the process that they are going to propose. And they are also going to present interim results at CRIC 21. It is going to happen in Uzbekistan in October this year. And the final findings will be also presented at COP16 in Saudi Arabia in 2024. So what are the options that they are trying to discuss? They are all discussing it at all levels, global, regional, and national. They are looking at many aspects. One of them is early warning and monitoring assessment, drought monitoring, vulnerability assessment. What options do we have to work on global regional, and national levels. What are the resources and incentives, especially at the regional level, but also at the global? What are the policy and governance options? They are looking into many options, and even to the extent of looking at the adoption of the amendment to the convention, adoption of an annex to the convention, and also even maybe including adoption of a protocol or agreement under the auspice of the convention. So there are a number of elements that they are looking into. And okay, I think I'm asked to put my PowerPoint presentation in. Okay.
Yes, Daniel, that would be great. So we didn't want to interrupt you.
Yeah. Okay, I think this is the case now.
Yes, perfect.
They are also looking into adoption of non-legally binding instruments, political declarations. What are the global frameworks? So a team of about 27 members from all countries, from all regions, and also some independent experts, civil society organizations, UN agencies are working on this. A lot of work is being done. And the members, IWG consists of 3-party representatives. We have 3 representatives from Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean, and also from Western Europe and other groups, Asia, and Central and Eastern Europe as well. So there are about 15 of them from 21 of them from regions, and also 2 experts, independent experts, 2 UN organizations, and 2 civil society organizations. So what have been done so far? First of all, the designations of the IWG members is completed. We have now a set of this IWG. The nomination is completed. We have some civil society organizations. The first meeting of the IWG was already conducted last year from November 29 to 30, 2 days meeting in Bonn. And they tried to work on their working modality. And they have also discussed on the next steps. And the next meeting is set to take place in March 14 to 15 in Yerevan, Armenia. And a lot of other meetings are also set to take place in the next few months and years. So Africa is very well represented by Mrs. Sukumsa, Mr. Bongani from Eswatini, Mrs. Sukumsa from South Africa, and Mr. Charles Lang from Kenya. As you could see, they are very renowned and also high-profile persons representing the region. And we believe these are ambassadors of Africa in the IWG process. So the task for these 3 representatives is to ensure that there is a whole lot of input coming up from all of you. What is needed? What are the real contexts? And what can we do to move forward on the agenda of drought in Africa? And so I think you can liaise with them and make sure that they are well fed when they come to the meetings to reflect the context and the position of Africa. I forgot, by the way, we have also Mrs. Rambau, who is going to be an alternate from the South Africa side. So we have about 4 of them from South Africa, but only in terms of an alternate. So I think from Africa, I just wanted to also highlight that Africa had its first drought conference in 2016, the first, probably also the last, in Windhoek, Namibia. And I would be happy to share with you the white paper, the declaration of this, and what is needed to manage drought, especially for the context of Africa. And you can build on that to really advise the IWG members. We have a number of IWG members from all regions, but I don't think this is of interest to this group. But we have all of them coming up from different perspectives, and they are very well represented. And I'm very happy to answer any of your questions that maybe needed to be clarified more. Thank you.
Dear Daniel, thank you so much. We're already receiving some of the questions. Thank you for the limited timing and sticking to it. Now I would like to pass the floor to Satu Ravola, Program Management Officer, UNCCD Evaluation Office, who will tell us more on the IWG on midterm evaluation on the 2018-2030 strategic framework. Satu, 7 minutes, please. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. And good day, everybody. Let me also try to, okay. I would like to also share my screen if you let me.
Go ahead, please, Satu.
Okay, does it work on one go? Does it look fine now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So to my understanding, we have a lot of new focal points around, and I think that in the list, I also saw quite a few not so new focal points. So indeed, good day to everybody. And just briefly to start, of course, everything that we do under this convention process is not only responding to the broad text of the convention itself, but also more specifically to time-bound strategic frameworks. The current framework that we have is for 2018-2030, so basically ending as the SDGs are expiring, and its midpoint is at 2024, which is at COP17. And last COP decided that now it's time to check what's going on, what progress we have made, what problems we have faced, and on that basis to see if we can make some improvements for the remaining second half of this strategic framework. In this process, we have several key components. Even if the intergovernmental working group is probably the most discussed about them, it's only one of them. So we have actually, first of all, an independent external assessment. We also have this working group to oversee the process. Then we will have a participatory process so that we get the feedback from a large group of stakeholders, particularly from the focal points. We will have a report for the submission to COP16, and eventually we would then have a COP16 decision on the midterm evaluation or integrated into different decisions, depending on how we proceed with the group. Scope of the midterm evaluation. So basically, it indeed will be based on the strategic framework. And that strategic framework has two main parts. One is about 5 very broad strategic objectives that deal with improving ecosystems, improving living conditions, building drought resilience, generating global benefits, synergy studies, and mobilizing resources through partnerships. So this is one part. The second part is the implementation framework in the strategic framework, which is basically telling the roles and responsibilities of parties, UNCCD institutions, and so forth. So this is the kind of the focus area of the midterm evaluation. Okay, this is now a bit of an evaluation jargon, but of course the independent assessment that provides the basis of this consideration of the next steps after this midterm evaluation. It will be built around the OECD DAC evaluation criteria. And those of you who have been dealing with earlier, you know that it's about relevance, coherence, effectiveness, efficiency, progress to impact, and sustainability. And in addition, we have, as usual, gender responsiveness as a cross-cutting criterion. We will collect information against these criteria through different methods, different sources that will include, for example, the data from national reporting, documents under the UNCCD, documents elsewhere where relevant. We will have probably quite an extensive survey, at least the focal points, probably also other stakeholder groups. On this basis, we have a team of consultants, external evaluators, that will use this data to create an independent assessment, which is likely to be a rather substantive report, and which aims to provide evidence-based factual findings under these evaluation criteria on the topic of the evaluation. So basically, this study will look at the strategic objectives and the implementation framework against measuring them to whether they are relevance, coherent, effectiveness, and so forth. So this will be one part of the one big chunk of this midterm evaluation process, this independent assessment. And that is indeed aiming to be factual, evidence-based, almost scientific exploration of what is out there. And this is then handed to the intergovernmental working group, which will on that basis start considering its own report about the midterm evaluation. So, of course, the report of the working group will be the one then submitted to COP16 as a COP document. And it will represent the sort of a strategic and political considerations of this group that is based on the factual findings that are discovered through the independent assessment. So we will basically have two different reports. One is the large evidence-based document, and the other one is then politically considered document, much briefer and much sharper, that will be submitted to COP16. And of course, eventually at the COP, we will then have a COP decision on the next steps. Just a few more things. The working group is a bit smaller than the one that we have for drought. So we have 15 people nominated by regions, and then we have 7 observers. So 2 scientists, 2 civil society representatives, then we have representatives from FAO, Jeff Secretariat, and IUCN. We will have, at least so far, we will have 3 meetings. First one is starting on Monday, from Monday to Wednesday next week here in Bonn. Second one will take place immediately after the GRIC in October in Samarkand. And the last one will then be in time for us to prepare the submission to COP16. You may also want to notice that because, of course, we're talking about very overall work with the midterm evaluation. So in the Secretariat, we will try our best to link the other processes, such as the drought working group, upcoming review of the science policy interface, and so forth, to this midterm evaluation, so that we can offer to you at the COP a coherent package of proposals coming from different forums. And here you will see the list of IWG member countries. And I think this was my last slide. So now I will just say thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Satu. Thank you for your time and for the wonderful presentation. And now I would like to give the floor to Sasha Alexander, Policy Officer at Global Policy Advocacy and Regional Cooperation Unit. He will tell us about very important issues such as land tenure, migration, and gender. Sasha, please, 7 minutes, please. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And as you saw from Miriam's presentation, we have a number of policy frameworks that are consistently discussed at the COP. And this last COP was particularly robust in terms of the expectations and the recognition that various policy issues are getting vis-a-vis reducing land degradation and enabling land restoration. So I've been asked to speak about migration, gender, and tenure. So I'll start with gender. And the COP was notable in terms of the gender caucus and the political profile that it had, given that the First Lady of Côte d'Ivoire was very much engaged. The outcome document is something to take a look at. You can download it from the COP15 website, but basically really underlines the fact that if we're going to be effective in our restoration activities, our rehabilitation, our sustainable land management, we really have to embrace half of the population, and in some cases, even a greater percentage of the population that is actually working the land. So that was a milestone. We have a roadmap that is related to the implementation of the Gender Action Plan. So I would encourage you to take a look at that. Parties are encouraging themselves to implement that roadmap. For example, to bring more gender equality into their delegations, as one example. The Secretariat also has roles and responsibilities, of which we are doing our utmost to fulfill. We're currently in the middle. We don't have a dedicated gender officer at the moment, but we will very, very shortly. So that's with regards to gender. The last thing I would say about gender, as it leads into land tenure, is the commitment and the request to the Secretariat that a gender caucus be held annually. So we are doing our utmost to fulfill that request, and we are planning for a gender caucus at CRIC 21 in Uzbekistan in October. Now, there's a lot of overlap, I think, many recognize the overlap between the gender agenda and the land tenure agenda. And COP14 in India in 2019 has some very explicit language that the parties have committed themselves to explore. And that's basically women's land rights and access to natural resources as being a fundamental and critical enabling factor to combat desertification, land degradation, and drought. So in terms of the tenure work stream, that also began in COP14. We had our first decision on land tenure. We were asked to produce a technical guide. We did so. We also produced a paper on awareness raising options. Those were all available for the discussion in Abidjan. And then COP15 asked us to go even further and see how we could operationalize or contextualize the technical guide, the background documents, the options paper for awareness raising, and so forth, so that it would be more practical and applicable at the national level. So we have, as we did with the technical guide, we teamed up with FAO and many other regional and global partners, but and in this case, after COP15, UNCCD and FAO continue to lead this team on a very exciting work stream. Many of you have, or all of you should have gotten an invitation. Next week, we'll begin our regional awareness raising webinars. This is exclusively for national focal points of the Rio Conventions, as well as relevant FAO staff. Then in late April, we will conduct an all stakeholders webinar, which will lead to a expressions of interest process, whereby countries can request support for national consultations on land tenure. At that point, we will select countries with regional balance, and we will start conducting these national consultations from September until COP16 in late 2024. So that's on land tenure. And then finally on migration, the decisions on migration, I think now go back about 4 COPs, but they've always been focused on what we can do in the land use sector. What are the land-based interventions that can be done to reduce forced migration or reduce internal displacement? And so we have worked with various partners over the years, International Organization of Migration, UN Habitat, and so forth, looking at these projects and programs and other policies and other activities that can be done to improve the quality of life in rural areas that would then reduce the desire to migrate. And particularly in terms of how do we attract or keep young people in rural communities, in the agricultural, the forestry sector, protected areas sector, and so forth. And more recently, we've been looking at the nexus between migration and urban-rural linkages. Again, this is very much in terms of land-based interventions, dealing with the flow of services, infrastructure that goes across ecosystems. So we're looking at the urban-rural linkages and how to strengthen those linkages so that we are providing a more stable and secure environment for both rural and urban populations. There's a lot of interdependencies that are absolutely critical. So employment and food are going, in opposite directions. Flows of technology, financial flows, digital connectivity. These are all critical things that are kind of part and parcel of integrated spatial planning. And so the focus now that we have is on migration, is seeing how we can strengthen these linkages to reduce forced migration. So with that, I'll stop, and I thank you for your attention.
Sasha Alexander, thank you so much. And please join the webinars that Sasha Alexander has just announced. They will be very interesting. And now I would like to give the floor to Ms. Anya Thust, Secretary of the CREEC, Science, Technology and Innovation Unit, UNCCD Secretariat. Anya will tell us the updates from the committee for the review of the implementation of the convention and on the praise for reporting. I'm sure all the countries are willing to hear about that.
Thank you very much, Nadia. I'm trying to share my screen now. I hope you can see it. If you can just confirm that.
We see it. If you could put it in the mode, in the presentation mode. And
I've just tried doing that. Now it should go.
10-15 minutes, Anya. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and very much welcome to the new focal points. And I would like to give you a little brief history of what the CREEC is and what it's supposed to be doing, and also, go a little bit into the details of the national reporting process that is currently ongoing. So the CREEC is basically a subsidiary body of the convention, together with the Committee on Science and Technology. It was established in 2001. The CST was basically established, while the convention was negotiated. So there's a bit of a difference there. So in 2001, parties decided to establish this subsidiary body, and mandated it to help the Conference of the Parties to review the information submitted by country parties, through national reporting, and also, gave it a mandate to basically review financial flows, and also a performance review function that basically takes care of, how the performance, how the convention's institutions, such as the Secretariat and the Global Mechanism, are faring, with regard to discharging their mandate. However, the last agenda item is basically a shared one with the Committee of the Whole, which is another subsidiary body that is always convened when the COP is meeting. And basically, this agenda item of performance review then moves on from the CREEC to the Committee of the Whole. Sorry. With regard to the sessions, we have two different kinds of sessions. We have the session which is always held in conjunction with the COP, and we have a kind of special session which is called the intersessional session, and that is normally the session where country parties can share their information, share experience. It's much more interactive, and of course, it always reviews the information that country parties submit through the national reporting process. Basically established in 2001, the CREEC has come a long way with regard to how reporting is done. In the beginning, national reports basically were drafted and submitted with very little guidelines on what needs to be contained in those reports. Then parties switched to like the UNCCD strategic frameworks that also Sato has mentioned in her presentation. And the current system that we are using right now is basically based on the second strategic framework that parties decided upon at COP13, and is based on 5 strategic objectives. The move to the indicator-based reporting has basically helped us, to gain credibility in the international community. which was one of the major issues that were identified by a joint inspection unit that was tabled. A report of this unit was tabled at a COP. So we have gained more credibility because we have more robust data, and the long-term objective of the reporting process and the praise portal is basically to provide parties also the opportunity to monitor their own implementation of the convention at national level. As I said before, the strategic framework that we are basically using right now for reporting is the one that was decided upon by COP13. In contrast to the previous one, we have now 5 strategic objectives. And as you can see, the SO3 here is on drought. And this is currently, also according to Danielle's presentation, drought is a major issue right at the moment, and we are hoping that the data that we are getting from country parties on SO3 will help us, to steer this the debates and the discussions on drought. The first reporting process that was undertaken using the 5 strategic objectives was held in 2017-2018. And as I said now, we are currently in the midst of the reporting process, with some deadlines already having passed. One thing that I really wanted to highlight also is that from the very beginning, in 2001, country parties highlighted the need for synergies, not only synergies with regard to the policies and the strategies that our country parties need to come up with following the various environmental conventions, but also synergies in reporting. And it so happened that in 2015 there was this window that opened us which opened for us, where country parties at the level of the convention decided to use the land cover, land productivity, and the carbon stock indicators. And the UNCCD made a bid at the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda meeting, to use one of those indicators as one of the SDG indicators, and we were successful with that. And with the methodology that was basically developed through the UNCCD and your input as parties, from your national reports, we were basically able to move and increase the credibility of that indicator to tier 1 level. So that's a really, great achievement. Now, coming to the reporting process, the following COP15 in Abidjan, we basically moved along and changed the reporting platform, the PRAISE 3 platform, according to the decisions taken by parties at COP15, which means that, we have now an online system which use geospatial data. We also have, default data that is being made available. And so, this PRAISE portal was launched in November 21, and parties basically received credentials. And here, for the newcomers, it is important to note that, normally we go and ask parties and national focal points to nominate a reporting officer. Given the complexity of national reporting under the UNCCD, it probably is very much advisable to have a reporting officer overseeing the reporting process. Now, with regard to capacity building, we were forced to sort of be a bit creative because of the pandemic and COVID. Which prevented us of having regional meetings where we could sort of train focal points and provide the innovations and teach the focal points on the innovations that were made due to the decisions taken by parties. Instead, we came up with a series of e-learning tutorials very step-by-step explanations of what needs to be done per indicator. We also had a series of online webinars or seminars that were held either at regional level or globally, where country parties were able to ask questions. And then most importantly, we have 11 international consultants that basically look after country parties on an online basis, case by case. If you have a question, you can reach out through the help desk in order to get one of those international consultants to contact you, and then you can basically chat with them and have online meetings with them. As I said before, the first deadline has basically passed. We have now SO1 data available for about 100 parties, which is not bad, but could be better. Let's put it that way. We have another deadline coming up on the 28th of February, and we hope that by that time, we get more reports in. Just a brief graph, that basically tells you what we kind of expected in terms of national report submission. As you can see, the yellow bits are the unknowns, where it was very difficult for us to reach the focal point or the reporting officer, so that, we weren't really sure, whether the reports will be submitted. It's also important to note that there were other challenges that country parties faced in terms of, getting the disbursement of the enabling funding. So that was a bit of a hiccup that kind of prevented country parties to start compiling their data in time. Now, with regard to the CRIC 21, very briefly, it was mentioned already, 9 to 13th of October, we will meet in Samarkand in Uzbekistan. Of course, on the major issue that we will look at is the data submitted by country parties, national reports, but also, the IWGs that I don't need to talk about right now, because Satu and Daniel have already done that. And Sasha basically covered the gender, land tenure, drought, and sun and dust storm. So Nadia, with that, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anya. We have several questions for you already upcoming, if you could cover that.
Sure.
For example, one of them is about, thanking you for the praise for and for the tutorials. And the question is, how do you avoid double reporting with UNFCCC? Also, we have another questions. Well, if you can answer this one, I will go on with others. Oh,
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. My understanding from the reporting modalities of UNFCCC is that they have different indicators and they have a different way of reporting. So the double reporting should be minimal, at best. I mean, that shouldn't really happen. What we have, however, is we used an indicator from the CBD that will help us, to really show the clear linkages between the two processes, and that can help also, for parties to make decisions on that, when we get to the COP.
Thank you, Anya. Another question from George Tadu. Some countries couldn't submit the land degradation report for some reasons. What could be done to support those countries to develop and submit the report in question?
Yeah, the problem is that, the Praise4 portal had a couple of glitches, and country parties, because of the complexity, had difficulties in using the trends.earth software. So, I mean, what we have done, I mean, the deadline has basically passed. We had a lot of help desk tickets from countries, and we are in contact with those parties. Tomorrow is the last deadline by which we need to get the inputs from those countries that we know had technical difficulties. you can always submit your data later. It will not be put in a database, and it will not feature as part of the official documentation, simply for the reason that we need to sort of cut off and start working on the analyses. And so, I mean, it is impossible for us, to receive documents or national reports later than basically, by the 20th of February.
Okay, thank you very much. We have some other questions. One of them is also about, thank you, Anya, this is for, maybe not for you. We have questions on the presentations, if we can share them. Yes, as I said already, we will share this information with you after we end our meeting. We have also a question, for example, I would address it for Sasha, please. Could you answer the questions on with respect to the call to the countries of the experiences for the management of pastures and the means of subsistence of the pastoral communities, how this is integrated into land tenure? Could you cover this, please?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So the COP specifically requested that we provide support to countries to strengthen land tenure, improve land tenure in those countries that have populations that are in vulnerable situations. And so pastoralists, women and youth, smallholder farmers were among the list of those that are in vulnerable situations. So yes, that will be quite a focus for us. When we carry out the national consultations, it will depend on the countries selected, but I would imagine that some of the countries will have a strong pastoral component.
Thank you. Thank you, Sasha, very much. We also have a question on the synergies between the three Rio conventions. What are the main reasons for establishing a healthy synergy between the three conventions? What key challenges are there?
Okay, well, the main reason is that we would be more efficient, we would be more effective, and we would be able to maximize the returns on our investments. If we stop these silos of climate finance, biodiversity finance, sustainable land management finance, and we bring them all together, because we know we can have multiple benefits when we harness these synergies. And you can see from the Global Biodiversity Framework that there are some very obvious points of collaboration. And so what we need is for national focal points like you to reach out to your CBD colleagues and say, oh, you've got the GBF, you're going to be doing your NBSAPs, you've got restoration, you've got integrated spatial planning, you've got women's land rights. How can we work together? How can we maximize our impact, the outcomes in our country that improve the lives of our citizens? So that's briefly, I could go on about synergies for a long time. Thank you. You're on mute, Nadia.
Very sorry. Yes, we have another question. Is some African countries haven't developed enabling projects? Can countries be reconsidered to receive support to do so besides the drought policy support? I will give the floor very briefly to Daniel, but please take into account that this could be covered in our next section where our global mechanism colleagues will be participating.
Yes, thank you very much, Nadia. I think this is very important, and this is not a question of one or two countries. It is a question of many countries. We have the policy now. How can we support us for implementation? So the global mechanism, they are now next in the line to present. They are working on enabling projects to support countries to take the first step to implement the policies. And I can say from my side that we are working with FAO to support at least a few countries based on their national drought policy. There was a lot of work done to make sure that at least there is a kind of a low-hanging fruit. Going through the national drought plans, what are the next steps? And they try to select about 12 countries, 2 countries per region, and they are now trying to support them to take the first steps towards implementation of the national drought policies. But basically, implementation of the national drought policy is, I think, the responsibility of the countries, but the UNCCD and the GM Secretariat can make sure that there is some kind of helping hand to take the first steps. So yeah, I think this is going to be very well taken by our GM colleagues, but thank you very much.
Thank you for this. And we also have one question about what capacity building training plan for the new focal points is there for a better implementation of our convention? Well, this actually, this session and this meeting is one of the planned events that we're holding for our national focal points. As Miriam already said in her presentation, we already had one meeting in Istanbul for the national focal points on negotiations, training, and skill building, and we're planning to cover all our national focal points with these instruments to let them be prepared to the maximum level for the next CRIC and COP. Talking about CRIC, Anya, there is another question for you on the, may I know whether coming biennial transparency report for UNFCCC in 2024 praise for data will be used as reference for LULUCF? Again, do you see, I will probably send you this question to you. And there is also, is it one of the objectives of CRIC 21 to negotiate and possibly adopt a decision about the relationship collaboration with Jeff? Well, I guess another interesting question.
Yes, I mean, that I can definitely confirm. You know, the collaboration with the Jeff is a standing agenda item of the CRIC at those sessions and at sessional sessions, however. So we always receive a very detailed report from the Global Environment Facility, you know, that country parties then discuss and come up with a separate decision on the collaboration with the Jeff. So that's a very important output that the CRIC is creating, yes. And with regard to the other question, I'm not aware that that any you know, data is being used by the UNFCCC from our data, at least up until now. You know, we'll see what the future holds.
Thank you very much. Well, I think with this, we more or less are covering the questions, but we have to give the floor to and pass to the next session too. And I am sure that many of the questions that you are writing now, they will be answered in our second session. If not, we will respond it immediately to you after the session. Okay, thank you very much. Now, thank you for this, for all the panelists and for your questions and for your patience. And I would like to pass the floor to my colleague, Mr. Mustafa Abdullah Yurtoglu, Regional Liaison Officer for Northern Mediterranean, for starting session 2. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nadia. I hope you can hear me clearly. I also want to thank all of our colleagues, all of our presenters, and also the colleagues from the Rabat office, our regional liaison officers over there that made this session happen. Before beginning, I just want to briefly just introduce myself. As you mentioned, I'm the regional liaison officer for Northern Mediterranean, located in Istanbul, Istanbul office. If I may, before moving forward, just for a brief second, I want to take off my UN staff mantle, seeing a lot of familiar faces here, a lot of distinguished national focal points, and several of them were with us last week in Istanbul, in Turkey. And you mentioned, Nadia, that as UNCCD, we consider ourselves as a family. And believe me, you can see it in most of the dire times. A lot of national focal points reach out to me and my other colleagues also to with their condolences, their solidarity messages. I want to thank all of them, each and all of them from here, and also the nations that sent, that reacted and sent their rescue teams, their helps to the nation. It's just a devastating disaster, definitely. Just for a brief information, just maybe in under a minute, with a 7.8 magnitude of a hit, more than 13 million people are affected, both in Turkey and Syria. Considering the number, you can already imagine how huge and devastating it was. But not all disasters happen in an instant. Some of them came crawling, and sometimes we just maybe don't see them approaching us. Just considering the numbers, I can say that drought until 2017, the last decade until 2017, it affected 1.5 billion. And land degradation, it is affecting more than 3 billion people all around the world. So what national focal points do, what is their role? We are now talking about it. Professor Richards mentioned in his presentation, they have key roles, but personally I want to tell them that they are heroes. With their actions, with their approach, they are touching millions of billions of people. So they have the potential to be superheroes. Again, thank you all for all your heartfelt messages. Thank you so much. Without further ado, I just want to move forward with the next agenda item, and it is G20 Global Land Initiative. It was in November 2020, and summit of the G20 leaders launched the global initiative on reducing land degradation and enhancing conservation of terrestrial habitats. Now, for more insightful look to this initiative, I just want to leave the mic to my colleague from GM Program Officer, Mr. Erkan Güler. Erkan, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me well? Can you see me well? Okay. Good afternoon, colleagues. Firstly, I welcome all new NFTs. Even for a short time, I had also an NFT background in Turkey. So I'm very happy to be with you here. My name is Erkan Güler. I'm working in UNCCD for around 4 years. And I've been part of the global mechanism of the UNCCD. And since last October, I'm also part of G20 Global Land Initiative team. So I'm mostly working on the area of data, reporting, and GIS. Today, I would like to talk about G20 Global Land Initiative with a brief presentation. I will try to share my screen. I hope you can see it.
Yes, Erkan, we are seeing it.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Yeah. As you know already, there have been efforts for decades to restore the degraded land as well as forest, such as One Challenge, land degradation neutrality in UNCCD, Decade for Ecosystem Restoration, Great Green Wall, some national initiatives like Saudi Green Initiative. So in this context, G20 Global Land Initiative was announced at 2020 Saudi Arabia presidency of the G20, which was held in Riyadh. The idea is to build upon existing commitments and restore 50% of degraded land by 2040. So that's an ambition to take, ambition to make. Even though it was started under the G20 presidency, Saudi Arabia G20 presidency, it continued under the Italian presidency, then Indonesian presidency, and under Indian G20 presidency right now. G20 Land Initiative has 3 objectives. First one is conservation, conserving land and halting habitat loss, fragmentation, and land degradation. Second one is sustainable land management, promoting integrated, sustainable, and resilient land and landscape management. The last one is land restoration, restoring degraded land. The initiative seeks enhanced cooperation between G20 countries, but also G20 and the outside countries. So it is, even though it's called G20 initiative, it is not only meant for G20 countries. And also, it seeks additional voluntary commitments from participating countries to raise ambition in this respect and contribute to SDG 15. and particularly 15.3. In terms of activities, there are a broad set of activities or key activities we can call. First one is to establishing a global information hub on land restoration. The idea is showcasing a good practices from anywhere. So this hub can act as information sharing hub for G20 countries and non-G20 countries. So all stakeholders, government, academia, private sector. There are already data and information existing like IUCN, World Conservation Monitoring System, and some other private initiatives. It will bring all together in a common information sharing hub. This is the idea. Second key activity is active engagement with private sector as well as civil society. This is the outreach and promote investment link, initiative, encourage involvement of civil society and mobilize general public because of land restoration, habitat conservation, and achieving this ambition. The final key activity will be sharing knowledge and building capacity. There are already a lot of capacity building activities happening within the G20 countries. But this initiative make it possible for the entire world to take advantage of these capacities within G20, but also with other institutions. The strategy, G20 Global Land Initiative has an implementation strategy to achieve. It was prepared by Initiative Coordination Office with guidance of Steering Committee. I don't want to go through in detail because of the time constraint. It is available on UNCCD website and G20 Initiative website. So you can reach all details, the pillars and activities for G20 Land Initiative. While initiated by G20 members, the initiative will seek to be inclusive of all countries who are interested in being associated with it. All countries will have opportunities to both contribute to the initiative as well as benefit from it. The initiative stressed that ecosystem including but not limited to forests, grasslands, drylands, rangelands, croplands, mangroves, soil, tundra, etc. The linkages between G20 Global Land Initiative and the SDGs, there is a strong connection with SDG 15. But as you can see in the screen, there are also strong connection between G20 Land Initiative framework and the 8 SDGs. So there are a lot of details, but as I said, there is a time constraint right now. So I will go through from here. The CBD, UNCCD, and UNFCCC ecosystem restoration is one of those topics which link to the 3 conventions in a strong thematic manner. Restoring ecosystem contributes directly to combating desertification, restored ecosystem improve and benefit biodiversity, and land and ecosystem restoration has a potential to be used for adaptation and mitigation of climate change. The initiative, therefore, has the potential to work with each of the conventions and benefit from their expertise and financing arrangements. The initiative will create a work stream for collaboration with these conventions and also maximize opportunities to bring these 3 together. So these conventions and their respective meetings can also be used as a way to increase awareness about the need for ecosystem restoration and habitat conservation. So linking the 3 conventions being the possibility of leveraging climate finance for land restoration by increasing investment in nature-based solutions. G20 member countries engage in a wide range of initiatives and programs to address the dual challenge of preventing degradation through the conservation of terrestrial habitat and halting and reversing existing land degradation. So these include land-based solutions such as habitat conservation, forest protection, and restoration of terrestrial ecosystem. In order to achieve these objectives of the initiative, we are preparing a country profiles of the G20 countries in the domain of land restoration mostly. And this includes the land area classified as degraded or having ongoing or planned restoration projects, as well as national institutions engaged in restoration and academic institutions which hold technical expertise on restoration, land restoration mainly. So this will be followed by a policy and financial analysis to understand the existing policy frameworks and financial flows into the land restoration domain. This information will then, from the basis for comprehensive opportunity analysis for both upscaling and land restoration within the countries and for cooperation between and beyond G20 countries. Also, the rotational basis of G20 presidency presents an excellent opportunity for gradual expansion of our restoration agenda. Over the past 10 years, developments in the field of artificial intelligence, robotics, the Internet of Things, and drones have started to demonstrate their potential to change many domains of human activities, and land management will be no exception. Artificial intelligence will be able to assist experts in pinpointing land degradation opportunities at a very localized scale, which was not possible before. The Internet of Things can provide early warnings about degraded land, and drones have a capability to support restoration and monitoring efforts. The initiative will provide dedicated attention to developments in new technologies and make technology a cross-cutting element across the pillars of the initiative. Bringing in modern technology can upscale youth, especially rural youth, in using modern technologies and therefore create jobs. G20 Global Land Initiative works through 4 pillars of action: showcase and share, build capacity, engaging private sector, empowering civil society. I will a little bit talk about briefly these pillars. The first pillar is share and showcase. In order to scale up land restoration and habitat conservation, good examples of field projects, programs, private sector initiatives, community initiatives, and legislation all need to be identified, documented, and projected. The initiative is developing a website to showcase publicly available information on degraded land, national and international commitments of land restoration, best practices, success stories in the restoration progress made, results achieved, and lessons learned. The website will not only serve as an information sharing hub to provide easier access to information on land degradation, conservation, and restoration, but also promote institutions currently compiling such information and foster the collaboration and broader engagement of various stakeholders in land conservation and restoration efforts. Of the 6 key challenges to achieve wide-scale ecosystem restoration identified in the strategy for the United Nations Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, following 3 related activity participation of the private sector in the conservation, sustainable management, and restoration of land. First, limited motivation by decision makers in the public and private sector to invest in long-term restoration activities. Second, scarcity of legislation, policies, regulations, tax incentives. Third, insufficient amount of financing available for investing in large-scale restoration. So G20 workstream, G20 global G20 workstream will aim to understand private sector thinking and trigger change. This will happen what private institutional investors are looking for their strategies and asset locations, and under which conditions would sustainable land use activities offer sufficiently attractive investment opportunities. So in this context, it is important to understand that the private sector is not a monolithic and has very interesting in the land management agenda. The initiative will encourage the direct engagement of civil society, including by mobilizing the general public for urgent action in the field of sustainable land management. The successful implementation of Pillar 3 relies on building social asset and right-based approaches combined with place-based responses to reduce land degradation and promote restoration of degraded landscapes and habitat conservation. The proposed action areas include creating a social forum for land restoration, creating a citizen science community, ecosystem restoration camps, media awards, promoting land-based solutions, and organizing other events. These are the headlines, but the team is working on it. The initiative supports the exchange of know-how and capacity building between G20 members, non-G20 members, and other partners and additional stakeholders, as well as support effort to accelerate the exchange of best practices to enhance land conservation and restoration efforts. The initiative can facilitate the practice of experts working in the area of sustainable land management by making use of modern online hybrid approaches, including by partnering with online educational platforms to achieve capacity building at scale for those who are outside of the conventional academic system, and by sharing and exchanging knowledge about technology through innovation hubs like the information hub. The initiative would contribute to the development and maturing the innovative new technologies. For the implementation, the initiative will develop financing mechanisms, including seed funding and facilitate networking through the innovation hubs to identify market opportunities, analysis of knowledge, identify capacity building bottlenecks, and encourage investments to address them. Restoration projects, both small scale and large scale, have been ongoing for decades, if not centuries. However, there is an increasing realization of degree of damage humanity has imposed on land ecosystem. There have been a collective global efforts to address the situation through additional national efforts. The Bond Challenge for forest restoration, the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plans prepared for CBD, land degradation neutrality targets, national determined contributions under the UNCCD, as well as United Nations Decade on Ecosystem Restoration announced by General Assembly 2020, all have similar objectives. So we are on same page. Yeah, lastly, the ECO, I would like to talk about the Coordination Office, G20 Global Land Initiative Coordination Office. As I mentioned in the previous slides, the Initiative Coordination Office is working on the create, managing and land conservation, sustainable management and restoration showcase website, showcasing existing knowledge sharing products and degradation mitigation, organizing capacity building and knowledge sharing activities, all activities for it. Budget-wise, it allocated to the ECO, the Coordination Office. It is based in UNCCD Bonn here. And the Coordination Office receives guidance from G20 Global Land Initiative Steering Committee. I think it was my last slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Erkan. I see one question, but I just want to leave it to the end of the segment. If you can just stay with us a little bit more, thank you so much. Now, next on the agenda, I see that we have a global mechanism. We have the managing director of the global mechanism, Louise Baker, with us today, but also we have two distinguished colleagues to Project Officer Birgui Lamizana and Program Coordinator Catherine Mutambirwa. I'm not too sure how they planned to have their presentation. Because of that, I just want to leave the mic to Louise Baker. Thank you. We can't hear you, Louise. I'm not sure if I am the only one not hearing her, but...
No, we're not hearing Louise.
We are not hearing her. Louise, are you there?
Okay, maybe it's a technical glitch, or maybe she's not available at this exact moment. Catherine, can or Birgül, one of you can just have a little bit introduction before.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mustafa, and welcome to the new NFPs. If Milka, you could allow me to share my screen. Thank you. So I'll start, and then Begi will take over. So I will give a general overview of the work of the global mechanism, and then I'll hand over to Begi to speak specifically about one of our flagship initiatives, which is on the Great Green Wall in the Sahel. So in terms of our support to country parties, most of our support is focused on supporting countries to set their land degradation neutrality targets, as well as national drought planning, as well as a big focus on project preparation. So in terms of the target setting, so far we've got now 130 countries that have committed to setting their LDN targets. And of those, currently 107 have finalized the process. In Africa specifically, we've got 49 countries that have successfully finished this process. And the next phase of this work is on the land degradation neutrality target setting 2.0. And this is based on a COP decision that came out of COP15, where we'll be supporting initially 15 pilot countries to enhance their current LDN targets to make sure that they're more quantitative, specific, time-bound, and policy coherent. And this will be supported through a GEF enabling activity project. We're about to sign the agreement, and there will be a call going out. So I urge countries to look out on our website for that call, but we will also send out the call on email. In terms of the drought work, through the drought initiative, which Daniel already spoke about, we've worked with 70 countries to develop national drought plans, as well as 2 regional drought strategies. In Africa specifically, we've worked with 35 countries, and of those, 25 have completed the process. Then, as I mentioned, the bulk of our work now is focused on implementation, and I think that was one of the questions that was asked. So we do support project preparation. The focus was mainly on early stage project development. However, we are expanding based on the experiences we've learned. So we enter our project preparation at various stages. The requirement is that at least the country should have set their LDN targets or developed their national drought plan. And for those countries who've made the submission and are familiar, they know that we require a project idea at least, and we need to know the source of funding that we're targeting to enable us to be able to make sure that we develop the project to align with that funding source. This was the requirement all along. However, we've noted that in some cases, this doesn't work so well. So we are now focusing more on a partnership approach where we work with the country, with the partners that work with the country parties, particularly those partners that are credited to the main funding agencies for the convention. So the Global Environment Facility, and more recently, the Green Climate Fund, Adaptation Fund, and we're starting to also strengthen our relationship with the development banks. And through this process, we work with strategic partners that are experienced in project design and work with them to try and support the country parties in developing both national and multi-country projects. So in Africa, we've received quite a number of supports with varying success. The countries where we've got projects that we've supported that have been approved are Zambia, Togo, and Tunisia in terms of the national projects. And then regional projects, I'll go into a bit more detail on that. So in the SADC region, for example, we are now working closely with the SADC Secretariat and the African Union on trying to mobilize around the Great Green Wall Initiative for Southern Africa. And this was again through a COP decision at the last COP. And then in the Zambezi Basin, we've been working with the 8 riparian states, working closely with the African Development Bank and FCDO funded facility where we've recently gotten approval for the regional component and for 2 country components, Zambia and Mozambique. Also with African Development Bank, we've supported the launching of feasibility studies for a program in West Africa. A lot of the technical support has been provided by SILS, working closely with the bank, and we've come in to support mainly through technical input and financing the launch studies, as I mentioned. Another recent one with the African Development Bank is a drought project, which is responding to implementation of the national drought plans and the regional drought strategy, with a specific focus again on 3 countries in Southern Africa. And this has been working with the African Development Bank. So in terms of, those are just some snapshots of some of the multi-country projects we're working on, and that's what we're trying to do more and more of, because we find the amount of time and effort it's taking us to work on national projects is more or less the same as regional projects, but with regional projects, we're able to support more countries. We also are working on cross-cutting issues in the GM. So for example, gender mainstreaming, which is aligning with implementation of the UNCCD Gender Action Plan. And we've got a colleague who's specifically focused on providing that support. Also on land tenure issues, building on the presentation by Sasha on the work they're doing in the policy unit. We're trying to link it with the project preparation and resource mobilization to ensure that our projects have also ensured that we're dealing with the land tenure issues. And then last but not least, we've also got a team that's working on private sector, and they've developed a number of very exciting new approaches. I think some of them were shared at COP, and we've got colleagues that are specifically focusing on that. So I think in summary, that's it from my side, and I'll hand over to Bergie.
Thank you, Catherine. I will also move quickly to present the Greek Green Wall, which is one of the flagship, as Catherine mentioned, and mainly focusing on the main finding from the decade of implementation for the Pan-African Greek Green Wall for the Sahara and the Sahel. But as the name indicated, it's a Pan-African initiative, so countries are welcome to join at any time. So the report from the 2020 highlighted many challenges, which is on governance, on monitoring, reporting, on funding gaps, and on technology, technical support. And based on this report, which you can find online, the One Planet Summit, next please, Milka. The One Planet Summit has been held in last January 2021, which give a kind of a booster for the Greek Green Wall initiative by pledging 19 billion US dollar for the 11 countries which has ratified to the Pan-African Greek Green Wall, and set up an accelerator and request the UNCCD to host that unit, with the mission to coordinate the effort to support the implementation of the Greek Green Wall, to enable a more comprehensive mapping and to connect different actors, and work and involve private sector and civil societies into bringing the effort toward the Greek Green Wall. Next, please. So based on that, the accelerator team has set up a strategy which to try to address the 3 main challenges in terms of governance and advocacy, monitoring and evaluation, and resource mobilization. And the main challenge was the silo approach within the 11 countries. And we worked with the Pan-African Greek Green Wall, which Secretariat is based in Nouakchott, Mauritania, with the chairmanship right now at Nigeria, the president of Nigeria. So each countries, we work with them to help them set a national coalition led by the Ministry of Finance and Environment to break the silos and to go into the leadership of either the presidency or the prime minister to gather different stakeholders, as I mentioned, government, non-government, private sector, and the financial and technical partners within each countries, and bring them to based on the harmonized result framework, which we helped to develop, because one of the gaps was also that there were no baseline, there was no common indicators. So this was developed, and then work with them to help them build a pipeline of bankable projects based on their needs. Next, please. So these are the different areas in terms of governance, on kind of coordinating the multi-stakeholders approach to support the national coalition, but also we did a mapping on the different no state actors at national level to enable them take part fully in the initiative, and then tracking the funding in terms of monitoring, in terms of keeping the track with the donors who has pledged to support the Green Wall and the monitoring. Next, please. So this is a kind of summary on the areas where we will be working with the countries. It's a kind of at different levels with different countries, working with them and kind of following up on time of national coalitions, how to launch it, how to make it kind of viable, working also with partners like UNEP in the baseline studies, which they are doing, building on the country's strategies, the non-stockholders' involvement, but also taking into account the countries which have the LDN targets and their draft reports. So this is a kind of our tracking table, which we are happy to share. Next, please. And the importance of that is that at each stage, it's really a kind of working closely with the countries, but making sure that the focal point or the national agencies of the Green Wall in each countries are also involving and working with the national focal point for UNCCD, for CBD, or for climate, bringing them all on the same platform so that they share the information. So this is an example of how we come up with the monitoring by setting up the indicators, developing the harmonized result management framework, having a task force working to set up the platform, having a weekly call with the data task force to set up and follow up with different partners, including SEALS, OSS, ICRAF, and others. Next, please. I'm not diving into detail on that. I'm just going to the pledge, and the pledge is just following up also on what has the pledge the partners made in terms of the 8 financial partners and toward which countries and toward which pillars. To date, this is the data for November. 80% of the amount pledged is mobilized into contributions, so more than 150 projects, meaning that 30% has been disbursed. Next, please. So this also is a kind of just showing up on terms of pillars and countries where the funding is going and how the donors have pledged to support the countries. Next, please. This also is going into the details on the percentage, on what is the tool we are using to follow up. Why are we doing this? We are doing this because sometimes many pledges have been done in different important agendas and events, but if there are no tracking and no follow-up, it's just evaporate. Nothing will happen. Next, please. And I think this is the summary of if you want to look at the impact of how we are following and helping the countries from 2019 to 2020, only 54 projects has been realized within the Green Wall. From 2020 going to 2025, we have already 150 on pipelines, and we are working really to improve that, working with the team in-house, but closely with the countries to develop transformative program so that they will really make the difference on the ground for the benefit of the countries and the population. So that's what I wanted also in nutshell to share with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. First, Catherine, then Birgü. Just for a brief moment, I saw Luis. Welcome back. We started before you, so sorry. Just maybe we don't have too much time, but just for a brief moment, the floor is yours, please. Please take over.
Take over. Love it. Hi, everybody. Hello, I'm Louise Baker. I'm the Managing Director of the Global Mechanism, and I work with my colleagues Catherine and Bergie and a fantastic team behind me. We do our very best to try to turn the ambitions of the parties into action, mainly focusing on the mobilization of resources, helping you with target setting, but then really linking that target setting with accessing practical support. It's a huge mandate, and we're a very, very small team. So we're committed to helping all of those parties that really want to work with us and are very enthusiastic, and we'll kind of accompany you on your journey as you set the targets, as you refine them, and as you go through the process of accessing finance from the different donors, whether that's GEF or GCF or multilaterals or bilaterals. Yes, we are. I don't know what the others have said, so I don't want to repeat myself and be very boring, so I won't do that. But we're super dynamic, we're super enthusiastic, and we are available to help. But we very much work on the basis that we're a team and we're in it together. So please come to us if you're ready to work hard on mobilizing resources and making the convention a reality. So I think I don't know if there were specific questions to us that you wanted us to answer, or I'll leave it to you. Let us know.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Louise. I just want to underline the last thing you said, please come over to us, just bother us, especially the regional liaison officers. Just please bother us, harass us. I don't know what is the right term that I can say that, but there is no small questions. We are here for you. We are here to assist you, and we are happy to be in close contact with all of you. Again, thank you so much. Right now I don't see any new questions in the question and answer part, but I will want one of my francophone colleagues, if they can help me. My French is really not well. I have one question, the last question, while Erkan was having his presentation. It's about private sector, I guess, anti-mobilization. But if anybody can help me with the translation.
Valerie is asking, Abdullah, if there is a guide or a manual that our parties can use on the questions relative to mobilization from the private sector or in the private sector. Thank you.
Aussi, la Guinée demande comment adhérer à la Grande Muraille Verte. Ça, je pense une question pour Guinée.
Bergie, do you want to take the question on the Conway Vert, and then I'll come back on the private sector?
Yeah, sure. I will go in French so that you get it well. Il y a eu la question du Bénin et de la Guinée sur comment adhérer. Le processus est assez simple parce que l'agence panafricaine, en fait, reçoit les pays et ouvert à tout nouveau pays sur demande. Donc, il suffit de faire une lettre de demande de votre président au président en exercice de l'agence panafricaine de la Grande Muraille Verte. Actuellement, c'est le Nigeria. En envoyant cette lettre, il faut copier au secrétariat de l'agence panafricaine de la Grande Muraille Verte qui est basée à Nouakchott. Et donc, après ça, je vais vous donner les contacts du secrétariat. Et c'est comme ça, par exemple, que la Gambie a fait et ils sont en train d'examiner sa demande. Donc, c'est vraiment un processus. Et copier également l'Union africaine, le coordonnateur de la Grande Muraille Verte. Si vous nous mettez en copie, nous pouvons aussi assurer le suivi. Voilà, merci. Luis.
And I won't try in French. Unfortunately, Valerie, I'm sorry, I'm better in English, but I can come back to you in French later on. On the private sector, I think there's two things to think about in terms of the private sector. First of all, why are you engaging with them? If you're engaging them with them for corporate social responsibility to finance your own program, that's one approach. And that there are a number of steps that I think you need to think about in that regard. There isn't a manual because it's very, very different in each country. The type of private sector, the type of rules that you have about due diligence and that sort of thing. So it's very, very different, but we're happy to talk you through some of the considerations if you'd like. The other part I would say in how we work with the private sector is in a couple of ways. We work in terms of blended finance. So many people, many countries, as they're designing projects, this isn't really for your national government expenditure, but for a project out there on land issues. We have been blending finance. So that really is when the public sector de-risks a private sector investment. So it's really how you structure a project going out there. This may not arrive in the bank accounts of the government. It probably won't. It probably will be an investment into an area or a space to restore or to start a new type of private sector enterprise that's restorative or that kind of engages in that sector. So the short answer is no, there's not a guide. The more helpful answer is, depending on what you want from the private sector, we're very happy to engage and advise you and point you in the right direction. So please do feel free to get in contact, probably easiest through your RLO, and then we'll put you in touch with the right people. Yeah, fantastic.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I see one hand raised, but I believe it is from earlier, but if there is any other questions, maybe you can just type in the question and answer part.
Mustafa, can I also respond to the question, because I thought that this question came to me, but I didn't know personally articulate everything well. So on the G20 side, there is no private sector guide. It's not available. And I think there will be, because it is one of the objectives of the G20 initiative. But for now, I think we can share a theory of change of the private sector engagement with you, with the participants, as an initial step. Please check our website because it is updated regularly, and there are and more will be relevant documents and guides, including private sector engagement and other documents. G20landinitiative.org. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Erkan. Again, I want to just say that any questions, just touch base with us, just reach out to us, send a mail, text. We are here. We are here to do whatever we can that is in our hands. Now, with all of your permission, I just want to move on because we are nearly at the end of our time. I just want to now give the floor to our last, but of course not least, speaker for final remarks, Dr. Edgar Biteres, who is the special envoy to Latin America and the Caribbean, and also a special advisor to the UNCCD. Edgar, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mustafa, and hello to everybody. First of all, let me say congratulations to all of you for having been appointed by your own governments as national focal points for UNCCD. Assuming that for some of you, this is the first opportunity to participate in a workshop of what it is to be a focal point for the convention, it is also fair to assume that some of you had not the slightest idea what were the duties of a national focal point for the UNCCD, despite the request from your superior to assume that role without an increase in your salary. Well, I assume this because I was a minister of environment and energy of my own country, and that's how these things were done then. So I imagine that this is also how it is done in other countries. But hey, the good news is that you won the lottery. After serving my country as Minister of Environment and Energy, I am convinced that the best thing for our countries is to have a legal instrument as powerful as that offered by our Convention Against Desertification and Drought. You already know that when land is degraded or suffers from recurrent droughts, it loses its ability to sustain life, leading to a range of consequences from crop failures to population migration to social conflict. Hence the importance of having this multilateral legal agreement that is the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, established in 1994, as was already said by Dr. Cox, and which allow us to protect and restore our land and guarantee a safer, fairer, and more sustainable future for all. As Dr. Cox pointed out, it was an original initiative of African countries at the Rio Conference in 1992, but now it belongs to all of us on the planet. The convention unites governments, scientists, policymakers, the private sector, and communities around a shared vision to restore and manage the world's land. This work is crucial to ensure the sustainability of the planet and the prosperity of future generations. You know that healthy land is fundamental to the well-being of the planet's ecosystems and biodiversity, for our food and protection, and to maintain a thriving global economy. Come now why I congratulate you on being a national focal points of this convention. You as it has been indicated in this workshop, are the link of our convention to your national realities to carry forward this beautiful task of caring for the land. The national focal points, as indicated, are the country representatives that serve as liaison with the convention, ensuring communication between the UNCCD Secretariat, your countries, their respective governments, and the non-governmental organizations. More specifically, national focal points play a key role in negotiating the policies of the convention on behalf of their governments and in advocating for assistance to include desertification, drought, or land degradation programs in national development agendas. Obviously, the work required to carry out these tasks is not for a single person, so it is suggested that a national coordinating body be established to coordinate the formulation and implementation of national action programs, which they are aimed at inter alia at mobilizing national and international resources to address the problems of desertification, land degradation, drought in your own countries. In the case of my country, for example, this body was created by the executive decree in 1997, incorporated the Ministry of Environment, the Ministry of Agriculture, the academia, a non-governmental organization, and the Meteorological Institute. I recognize now the absence of the office in charge of the disaster risk reduction. This national coordinating body has not only been responsible for developing the National Action Plan, but also coordinating its implementation with remedial actions in those basins that had been considered most degraded. It has made it possible to coordinate public policy and has had an impact on national development plans. Hence, my recommendation, my suggestion, that you take this initiative to your home countries as well. National focal points also work with national focal points in other countries at the subregional and regional levels to promote the implementation of the convention in these geographical areas for the development of regional plans, such as the one developed in the Sahel or in the Central American Dry Corridor, for example. In other words, they must go beyond the national level so that our countries can more effectively carry out their international commitment to the planet. As you, as a national focal points, are called to lead national initiatives that convene all sectors to face the challenges of drought and desertification. You must convince the private sector to get involved, civil society to participate proactively in the remedial programs that are established, but above all, you are called to influence public policy that reflects the work to be done in the restoration of lands and adaptations to droughts. But for this, you are not alone. You have support teams from the Secretariat at the regional and the regional liaison officers. Support that goes from scientific knowledge to mobilizing funds for specific projects. They have online training courses that will help you better visualize your role at the national and regional levels. Platforms to communicate with your peers and share experiences and success stories. In short, with an arsenal of tools so that you can better exercise your function. The world is in a profound transition, full of major challenges for the security of nations, from transnationalized crime to famine, depletion of natural resources, and the negative impact of land degradation accelerated by aggressive human interference in the geophysical and climate cycles of the planet. This is the scenario on which the parameters of security and defense revolve. And it is from this scenario that a strategic approach must be given to the subject of land degradation and drought. This involves understanding the world in a systemic and interconnected way as a great living being. The degradation of land makes democracies fragile, states weak, and populations vulnerable, which is the perfect breeding ground for the rise of unwanted political phenomena and the advent of social chaos. There is a clear relationship between environmental collapse, scarcity of resources, and extreme weather events with the rise of local or regional conflicts, institutional weakness, and these are all factors that must be incorporated into the analysis of the risk and opportunities for strengthening of democracy and peace in the 21st century. It is in this context that you are now involved in, not only to fulfill an administrative function of communication between your countries and the Secretariat on what should be reported to the latter, but you have in your hands the chance to generate opportunities for joint work with many other national and international actors or carry out a national agenda that allows the integration of the Framework Convention Against Climate Change, the Convention on Biological Diversity, and our convention, which offers an opportunity for working together, as Sacha has pointed out already. We wish you every success, and we're very grateful for your participation in this workshop. We'll be seeing you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Edgar. Well, it's time to wrap up. Thanks to all our distinguished national focal points that were with us today. Again, I also want to thank our interpreters who made it possible to understand each other, and also definitely our RLO colleagues in Rabat office for all their hard work to make today possible. See you in another time with another agenda. Thank you so much again for joining us. Thank you.